prove that it's not perfectly preserved. Now I want to point something out to you. People forgot parts of the Quran all the time. In fact, Muhammad himself forgot parts of the Quran. Let me read to you from Sahih al-Bukhari. Allah's apostle heard a man reciting the Quran at night and said, "May Allah bestow His mercy on him, as he has reminded me of a verse from this surah which I was caused to forget." That's Bukhari 661, 558. Muhammad forgot parts of the Quran, as he says himself. Other people forgot large parts of the Quran, and we'll talk about that in a moment. When we look at what some of the companions of Muhammad said, they have said that parts of the Quran were lost. Umar said, now Ubay was one of the reciters of the Quran. Umar says, Ubay was the best of us in recitation, yet we leave some of what he recites. And we turn to Ubay, someone who was named by Muhammad as one of the best teachers of the Quran. And Ubay says, I have taken this from the mouth of Allah's apostle and will leave it for nothing whatsoever. Here's a teacher of the Quran, one of Muhammad's chosen teachers of the Quran. And he says, I hear something from Muhammad that you don't recite, and I know this is part of the Quran, and I'm not going to leave it no matter what you do. So tell me, was Muhammad bad in choosing Ubay as one of his best teachers? I don't think so. I think Ubay knew what he was talking about. We also go to another section, and that, by the way, was from Sahih Bukhari, Volume 6, Book 61, number 527. We turn to Sahih Muslim, and it says, we used to recite a surah which resembled in length and severity Surat Al-Bara, which is 129 verses. I have, however, forgotten it with the exception of this, which I remember. If there were 2 valleys full of riches for the son of Adam, he would long for a 3rd valley, and nothing would fill the stomach of the son of Adam but dust. Sahih Muslim records for us a verse that was lost from the Quran. We even go further in Sahih Bukhari. And now Umar, the Khalifa, Umar, is speaking, and he says there was a verse of stoning which has been left. Sahih Bukhari, book number 82, hadith number 817. In fact, when the Quran was being collected, some parts were only remembered by one person. If we look in Sahih Bukhari 661, 509, it says, Zayd was speaking, and he said, I started looking for the Quran and collecting it from what was written, and also from what was in the hearts of men, till I found the last verse of Surah At-Tawbah with Abu Khuzaymah al-Ansari alone, and I did not find it with anyone else. So here's one man, only one man who knows this verse. And it's not until he recites it that other people remember it. Of course, parts of the Quran can be lost. Muhammad said parts of the Quran were lost by having forgotten them. So we know that there's a large amount of potential, and then people are saying verses were left out. Remember Ubay ibn Ka'b, one of the teachers of the Quran, that Muhammad handpicked according to Sahih al-Bukhari. His Quran contains 116 chapters. That's 2 chapters more than we read today. He said that there should be more in the Quran than we have. One of Muhammad's other teachers, Ibn Masud, in fact, the best teacher of the Quran, the first person to recite the Quran in Makkah after Muhammad himself, he had 111 chapters. He did not include Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Al-Nas. So teachers of the Quran are disagreeing on what's supposed to be in the Quran.
20 seconds.
People are forgetting parts of the Quran. It's being recorded by people like Umar, like Aisha, like Ibn Abbas, like Ubay ibn Ka'b. These recordings should not be ignored. My friends, let me tell you, if you think this book is perfectly preserved, there is no way to prove it, and we have every reason to disagree with that word, perfect preservation.
Thank you, Dr. Nabil. And we will go ahead and give now our Muslim apologist, Osama Abdallah, 5 minutes to provide his rebuttal. If you're ready to go, you can start right now.
Sure. I just read. I just gave Nabil Noble chapter 87 verses 5 through 8 about Allah Almighty claiming that He will preserve what He pleases from the Holy Quran. Okay. سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء ربك. Okay. So Allah Almighty said that whatever He wills, He will preserve. Now we keep hearing about these alleged verses that were lost or where people were confusing. Let me tell you one thing. Many of these claims were written 100 years in Iraq after the death of the Prophet. And these narrations are ahad. They have thin authenticity, very thin. In fact, ahad is one of Allah Almighty's attributes, divine attributes, and it means absolute one. And ahad hadith means that very few narrators, in fact, sometimes one narrator even just mentions them. And we don't have these verses. We hear about them. That's all Nabil can offer. He can only offer us, claims that these verses existed. Sure, people either confuse them with other verses in the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran has 6,236 noble verses. 6,236. Okay, so it's easy to believe that one verse doesn't exist in this chapter while it existed in another chapter. Okay, so points refuted there. Or people simply mix the hadiths or even translated into Arabic verses from the Mosaic Law, from Deuteronomy, Book of Deuteronomy, with the Quran. They might have confused that. So that's not really a valid point. As to the Surah Al-Bara, lost surah, again, this is refuted. Where is that surah? Where are the contents of it? Maybe it's another surah that we have today. Surah Ayat al-Rajm, the verse of stoning the adultery, that law was never abrogated. Okay, and it's in the hadith. It's not a noble Quran. It's in the hadith. We have many hadiths that talk about it. As to the 116 chapters, this is a mawquf narration. Brother Bassam Zawadi have proven it to you, demonstrated during your debate with him, and I invite everybody to listen to that debate because he went into great details about this. This is a hadith that is cut. Its chain of narrations is cut, and it's very doubtful, so therefore we cannot take it. And that's that. Now back to the Arabic. I was mentioning, by the way, he said, how do we know that the Quran of today was preserved? Well, if you look at the miracles of the Holy Quran, we would be able to tell that. For instance, the miracle in mathematics and computer science. And we have, on my website, I have close to 100 divine miracles of the Holy Quran that speak about astronomy, biology, geology, every science. And we also have in mathematics and computer science numerical miracles. The Quran, as I mentioned, has 6,236 verses. If you sum the chapters, has 114 chapters, 1 plus 2, 1 plus 3 plus 4, all the way to 114, you'll get 6,555. Okay? Now, if you add each chapter with the total number of its verses, you'll get a number. So chapter 1 plus the number of its verses, which is 7, equals 8. Chapter 2 plus the number of its verses, I believe 256, or something, it would equal a number, etc. If you get a list of that and you take the sum of the even numbers, you would get 6,236. And if you get the sum of the odd numbers of that, you get 6,555. Perfect positioning of the noble verses, perfect mathematics, perfect preservation by Allah Almighty. Allah Almighty perfectly chose what He exactly wanted to preserve from the glorious Quran. It's not some hogwash book
1 minute.
that we have and
One
we
minute.
say it's from God or it's preserved from God. No, we have mathematical, and have tens of them, mathematical miracles that testify, similar to this, that testify to the purity of the Quran and the preservation of the Quran. Also, if we look at the scientific miracles of the Holy Quran, we would see that, for instance, Allah Almighty said, وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا. Dahaha means expanded, means He made spherical. It means He makes it go around or be moving. Okay. For instance, in Arabic we have words like daharaja, which pushed.
20 seconds. 20 seconds.
The kid's little bike that he rolls down. Daharaja also means to roll down. So the dahaha made it spherical, make it moving in space, rotating around its own axle, and is expanding. All these meanings in one word, and God Almighty said the earth is suspended and spherical. Also said the arda kifata, ja'al arda kifata, moving fast. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, no, your time is up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, we will give now Dr. Qureshi an opportunity for a 5-minute rebuttal, and anytime.
Thank you very much, Osama. I want to point out to everyone that Osama started off by saying that I'm giving weak narrations, weak ahadith. Let me remind you, every single hadith I quoted was from either Sahih al-Bukhari or Sahih al-Muslim. And Osama has this tendency to throw out any ahadith he doesn't like. He says, oh, well, if that one makes it sound like the Quran wasn't perfectly preserved, let's throw it out. It's weak. Ladies and gentlemen, am I going to trust Osama Abdallah or am I going to trust Imam Bukhari? I would trust Imam Bukhari over Osama. Everyone who investigates these things has to determine what is an appropriate hadith and what is not. And Osama's criterion seems to be, let's use those hadith that I like. That's not how it works. Let's stick with one standard. And I would suggest if we find something in Bukhari and Muslim, and we find things along similar lines in multiple books throughout multiple times, then we should actually consider that to be true statement. So that's number one. Number two, Osama refers to this concept of abrogation, and he says things have been caused to have been forgotten by Allah. Now, the Quran does say that Allah forgets, or causes people to forget certain sections of the Quran. This is very strange to me, because as Osama mentioned in chapter 85, the Quran is perfectly preserved in heaven on a tablet. And yet when it's being revealed, sometimes parts are allowed in the Quran, and then later Allah says, no, that's not part of the Quran anymore. Doesn't sound like a tablet that's being revealed. But regardless, let's see what he's talking about. Chapter 2, verse 106, and chapter 16, verse 101 of the Quran both say that things can be abrogated, that Allah can allow things into the Quran and then later remove them for something better. Now, scholars who study this concept of abrogation, and pretty much anyone who studies the Quran to any degree, will know that the abrogation happens for commands. It doesn't happen for random sections of the Quran. It doesn't happen for narrations or historical statements. It happens for commands. Now, what was that verse that I read? Was it a command? No, the verse was about Adam and the son of Adam. And if his belly were to be filled with riches, it would still not be enough, and he would need yet another valley full of riches. Is that a command? No, absolutely not. Could this have been abrogated? No. I agree with Ibn Abbas, who says that it was forgotten, that people had forgotten it. And in fact, he isn't the only one. Many people agree with him that that was forgotten. Aisha herself agrees that that section of the Quran was forgotten, and that it used to be much, much longer. So abrogation does not work here. Osama, I would suggest you take a look into that. Abrogation cannot account for this at all. It was forgotten. Also, you mentioned the number of the verses in the Quran. You keep saying that there are 6,236 verses in the Quran. I agree. In this, there are 6,236 verses. But according to scholar Abu Ahmad Yasir Qadhi from Yale University, he says that different sections of the Islamic world had different numbers of verses, and the scholars disagreed. Kufa had 6,236. Damascus, 6,227. Hims, 6,232, Makkah, 6,210, Medina, 6,217. They couldn't even agree on the number of verses. Now that's fine. A numbering system doesn't mean the same thing as words. That's fine. But if you're going to base mathematics as the basis for perfect preservation, you have a problem, because that numbering system was rather arbitrary, and it doesn't show anything about the words of the Quran being perfectly preserved. You also said that Ubay ibn Ka'b's 116 chapters is not relevant. Well, I would respond by saying, well, actually what you said was you referred to Bassam Zawadi, who is a student, an excellent and sharp student, but you referred to him as authoritative, that Ubay did not actually have 116 chapters. I will refer again to scholar Abu Ahmad Yasir Qadhi, who said there are 116 chapters in Ubay's Quran, and it was stated multiple times throughout Islamic tradition. So scholars, Muslim scholars believe this. I wouldn't refer to a student in history as someone who can veto the scholars' opinions. Muslim scholars believe that Ubay had 116 chapters, and yet this Quran has only 114. Again, we know exactly what chapters they were that weren't included, and we know that other scholars, such as Muhammad's favorite teacher of the Quran, Ibn Masud, had a different number of chapters. And we know Ibn Abbas had a different number of chapters. People just had disagreement all around the board on what should be included in the Quran. Now notice, I'm referring to Muslims from early Islamic history who are in agreement that large parts of the Quran were lost or missing. Osama is coming to us in 2010 telling us otherwise. Should I believe Osama, or should I believe the host of Muslims right near Muhammad's time who said parts of the Quran are missing? Do not be taken in by rhetoric. We have so much reason and so much evidence to believe that this is not the way Muhammad revealed it, that it is overwhelming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for that, for keeping track of the time. Speaking of that, we're going to go to a quick break. Just briefly here, we welcome everyone to get your calls ready. We will be going to phone open lines toward the end of this next break. So stay tuned. Stick with us. We look forward to hearing from you. And think about this. Again, tonight's topic, has the Quran been perfectly preserved? and we will give these gentlemen a chance to speak some more after this break, and then we'll be coming back eventually to give everyone out there in the viewing audience a chance to call. So stay tuned. Come right back after this break. We'll be right back. Thank you.
You are watching ABN.